What's it like to have MS? And what do you do about it? In this video, I interview Alene Brennan of Pharm, More Table, and she talks all about her MS journey. Let's dive in. I have Alene Brennan from Pharm, More Table with us today, and I'm very excited for her to be on to talk about her autoimmune disease journey. Welcome, Alene.
Thank you so much for having me, Michelle. I'm excited to be here.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about you and your blog?
Yeah, sure. So I was diagnosed with MS in 2016. So I share a lot about my journey with multiple sclerosis and all of the many ups and downs that come along with living with an autoimmune disease. I actually have two other autoimmune diseases, endometriosis and interstitial cystitis, which don't affect me as much today, but are still part of my messaging and the things that I share with the community. I share a lot about autoimmune disease and then the tools that have really helped me heal my body and to feel good on a day-to-day basis.
Nice. That's a great message. So let's just talk about your autoimmune disease a little bit more. Going back to, like, say, your initial diagnosis, what kind of symptoms were you experiencing?
It's interesting with MS. We really stumbled upon the diagnosis for me. We were not expecting an autoimmune diagnosis, and we definitely weren't expecting MS. What prompted me to go to the doctor is I was getting exertion headaches. And I knew what they were because I had been getting debilitating migraines since I was in elementary school. Like I had been seeing a neurologist as early as second grade, and I was on, all kinds of different medications. And then early on, I changed my diet. And that's when I first started to notice a connection of food with how I feel. So that was kind of like high school age, but nonetheless, I had migraines of part of my day-to-day life for a number of years. And I was in a season of really intense stress. In 2015, that December, my mom had transitioned to hospice. She was at the end of a 10-year battle of cancer. And this is when those exertion headaches started to pop up. So I knew what they were because of my history with migraines. I wasn't super caught off guard with them. And I knew I was under the highest amount of stress I was ever in my life. So they really didn't alarm me, but my insurance was about to change. And I just wanted to check in with my doctor because I hadn't been for a checkup with a neurologist in quite a while. So she said, you know what, we haven't done MRIs in a long time. Let's just get some current ones for you. We did the MRIs, and my emphasis was always, can we get them done like ASAP, because again, my insurance is changing on New Year's Day. So let's get them under this calendar year. Well, she took that as like, I needed everything by the end of the year to the extreme, because she called me at 8:30 on New Year's Eve to tell me that the radiologist gave it an MS read. MS was never discussed prior to that conversation. And she even said in that call, she's like, I don't know that I fully agree, but you definitely have lesions on your brain. And she said that can be common for somebody with such a significant history of migraines as you. So it's not an alarm to see the lesions. What has raised concern is the shape and the location of the lesions. That's what kind of triggered more testing and then ultimately a definitive diagnosis. So, to kind of answer your question, there weren't symptoms that I was aware of. It was the exertion headaches, which aren't connected to MS, but they are what led me to my diagnosis. And then once I was in the appointment of my final diagnosis, the neurologist said, have you ever experienced brain fog, fatigue, urinary frequency, urgency, heat sensitivity? And in my mind, I'm like, yes, yes, and yes. Like these are all symptoms that I've had. And I just thought they were random. I didn't give much credit to them. So to a certain extent, it was really validating to have somebody connect the dots for all of them. And it was almost a relief of like feeling like, okay, I I really did feel that awful, like, because I would put pressure on myself of like, all right, you're tired, but like, so is everybody else. Let's keep things moving here. So to have that validation was helpful. So once he put the connection together, fatigue, brain fog, urinary frequency, urgency, heat sensitivity, and then the trigeminal neuralgia, that's a doozy. That's the intense pain on the side of your face that can feel like you're being electrocuted. So it's really fun.
Oh, that sounds fun.
Yeah. And it comes out of nowhere. So you're just like going about your day. And then all of a sudden, it's like, it literally feels like you're being electrocuted. They come in short spurts, but I noticed they did come in waves when I was under a high period of stress. So that was definitely one of the symptoms. And as anybody who gets diagnosed, like you have that moment of diagnosis and then you hear the symptoms and you're like, oh, I've actually been living with this for a number of years now. This is new like knowledge, but this is not a new experience for my body.
Yeah. Oh, wow. I can't even imagine. Huh. What would you say like was going through your head when like on New Year's Eve when your doctor called you with that diagnosis?
What was going through my head on New Year's Eve was different than what was going through my head when I got the actual diagnosis, which wasn't until that following July. On New Year's Eve, when I got the call, it almost like it didn't sink in. And I think it was because I was going through so many other things that I heard that and I was like, what is MS? Like, I don't even know what MS really is, but it's not something that I have. So I don't know what this is all about, but I got enough stuff on my mind right now. I was literally in my bedroom getting dressed to go out to like meet up with my friends who I hadn't seen in such a long time and just have a night of like normalcy. So like that night, it was just kind of like, I didn't give it much credit. But then I started to do some initial testing in the beginning of the new year. And then I decided there was nothing that was definitive at that time. So I decided to put it on hold because I wanted to spend more time with my mom. And it wasn't until she passed that I then went back, got more testing. So it was actually July of 2016 that I got the official diagnosis. And when I first heard it, it was like, even though I had months of like that kind of possible, the preparation of like, this is a possibility, it still feels like a punch to the gut when you have somebody saying like, no, you actually do have a chronic illness now. It was really overwhelming because it felt like to a certain extent, we had just gotten out of the medical system with my mom because she was getting scans for 10 years. And it felt like we were constantly living in this, like, first she got annual scans, then she got them 6 months, then 3 months. So it felt like we were living in these increments of her scans. And then when she passed and we knew she wasn't in pain anymore, like there was almost a sense of relief that she was not in pain, but then also that we were out of the medical system. So then literally 6 weeks later to be told that now I'm going to be the one that is in the medical system, like that was a big factor that really weighed heavy on me because I certainly didn't want to be in this place, but I didn't want to put any pressure on my family. Like I didn't want to have to bring them into this. So there was a lot of like emotional struggle with that. But then of course, like I think just the natural questions that pop up of getting diagnosed with an incurable disease, like in the back of my mind, I'm like, what's going to happen to my body? And when will it start happening? Will I still get married? Will I still have kids? Like all of the things that I think are normal of that, like fear kicks in and you're like, wait a minute, what just happened to the life that I thought I was living with like this great future ahead? What is my future now? So I think just a lot of like emotional like questions and fears and all of that was really starting to get stirred up.
Yeah, you bring up so many great points there too, like with not taking on that identity at first when you first hear about it, because I think we all do that. It's something other people have, not necessarily what we have, and it's definitely a journey to get to a point where you actually can take that on and understand that, okay, there's something I need to do about that, or do research or whatever. Like I think it's a very common thing that a lot of people struggle with. And then also
Yeah.
you mentioned
not wanting to put that burden on your family as well, because it isn't just about you. Unfortunately, it is something that other people have to deal with, and having to kind of have that interplay of,
Yeah.
I understand what's going on with me and do the things that I need to do, but also not become a burden or affect my family too much.
Yeah, because I think as women, like our natural tendency is to be givers and provide care to the people around us. And we're often in that place of caring for others. And then the thought of like, wait a minute, I actually need to be cared for a little bit now. It can feel a little uncomfortable because that's not our natural tendency. But then when we do start to look at it and face the reality that like, no, this is actually something that I need to address because I want to protect my health. I want to slow the progression of this disease down. I want to maintain my independence and highest quality of life as possible. So I think that's what, at least for me, but I think for many women, it's knowing the risk of not accepting that care and the risk of not doing the things that we need to support our health that really drives us to be like, okay, like, yeah, I do need support here. But yeah, it's a wild journey. It's a wild journey. And I know, especially with MS, it's known as the snowflake disease because it can look different on each person. So you mentioned identity, and I think that it's such an interesting dance that you go through, because 100%, like at first there's like this a little bit and denial that kicks in of like, no, that's not me. Like, I don't have an incurable disease. I don't have something that could potentially put me in a wheelchair. Like, no, I'm a yoga instructor. I'm a personal trainer. Like, I'm a nutrition coach. Like, I'm a very physical person. So how am I diagnosed with something that affects my mobility and all of these different things? And then you start doing research on like, golly, you go online and you see all the worst case scenarios, but then understanding of like, okay, there has to be an acceptance of the awareness of, yes, this is something that I'm facing now, honoring that you can go through this in your own way. So my experience with it doesn't have to look identical to anybody else's. So we get to kind of support our body with all the different tools that we use to create our own experience with it. It doesn't have to look or mirror anybody else's.
I love that. So talking about that, what did you do when you first got that diagnosis, like in July, and then after that, in terms of like either diet or lifestyle or any of like, going the conventional route? Like what exactly does that look like?
I was diagnosed through a traditional neurologist at a local university hospital. And I did opt to do conventional medicine at first. And I know that I took like a half a second to debate it because I was just in such a state of shock and fear and trauma and grief and all the different things. Had I been diagnosed now, I probably would have asked for a little bit more time just to focus on diet and lifestyle. But I don't want to share that to suggest that there was anything wrong with doing medicine, because I did it for a period of time and it felt like the right thing to do at that time. And I'm grateful for it. I did start on that. But I also mentioned that I was a nutrition coach at the time of my diagnosis. I had a nutrition coaching practice and yoga classes and all the different things. So that just naturally was my go-to of, okay, what can I do from a food perspective? And I think that was my way of feeling empowered and feeling like I had seeking some control in a place where I felt like everything was stripped from me. Of course, in the doctor's office, as many of us do, we ask what the doctor thinks of, food. Oh, eat whatever you want. It doesn't make a difference. Okay, thank you very much. I was like, okay, I respect that that's your point of view. You are very research driven, and I come to you for the best clinical experience. I know what food can do. I saw it with migraines, and now I'm going to see it with MS. Let's roll. I was working with a functional medicine practitioner at the time as well. And I remember the first time I met with her after I had the official diagnosis, and I said, I don't think I can. I knew of one diet, and that was the swank diet. It's not completely vegan or vegetarian. It models more of that than anything else. And I said to her, I was like, I have an allergy to nuts and I have an allergy to soy. So that just feels really stressful and really restrictive. And that's when she said, there's also this other diet out that's just recently been published in a book, the Walls Protocol. I think that actually looks more promising, and you can eat meat on it. So I think this aligns more with your diet preferences or, your food preferences and allergies. So I started on that, and it was really helpful. So I did use conventional medicine, but then I also pulled in diet and lifestyle, and I think both were incredibly helpful.
So did you find immediate relief with these different things that you were working with, or did it take a while?
I think one of the things that helped me get relief the fastest were the dietary changes that I made. I already was primarily gluten and dairy free prior to my diagnosis, but I definitely more intentional with that, of making sure that, you see it pop up as an ingredient in like sauces and things like that. So I started to just understand where gluten and dairy were still in my diet. And I really tried to be intentional with eliminating that. But then as part of the Walls Protocol, there was more intention on getting vegetables into your diet. And I grew up eating quote unquote healthy. I ate vegetables, but I never was really intentional with making sure that I was getting them at like every meal. So I think making sure that I was getting the inflammatory foods out, and then starting to increase the number of vegetables and fruits that I was eating in a day, just really helped to cut the inflammation in my body and really helped to address the fatigue and the brain fog. Those were the two things that I felt relief with the most earliest. And I would say that I felt that within like the first 30 days. But then as a whole, I can say from an MS perspective, within 6 months, the lesions on my brain shrunk and went inactive. And that was huge. That was huge. That was the win that I needed to have confidence of like, okay, what you're doing is working. And of course, you have that conversation with your neurologist and you're like, yes, it worked. The diet is working. The food changes, the lifestyle changes, all the things I've been doing. And he's like, excellent. The medicine's working. And I'm like, but you told me that it wasn't going to affect any of the symptoms. And he's like, but you got relief. So it had to have been through that. And I'm like, I'm not having this conversation with you. I'm just going to keep marching forward with what I'm doing because it's helping.
What you got to do, you have to like live almost like a double life, right? The one that your doctor sees and then the one that works.
It's so true. And I think quite honestly, because I talk with a lot of people who say like, I'm just so frustrated. Like my doctor, whatever specialty doctor it is, like my doctor doesn't respect the fact that food makes a difference for me. And I learned very early on, specifically with this neurologist, that I'm not out to convince him or her, who, whatever the situation is, of my beliefs about food. I'm going to choose to go to them for the clinical experience. And then I know like I can sprinkle things in that I'm doing from a diet perspective just to hope that I'm planting seeds with them, but not with the expectation that I'm going to walk away with their validation or their approval. And I think once I got to that place of recognizing that, it helped me manage it much better because I knew how much diet and lifestyle were improving the quality of my life. That's what I cared about most. I don't care what my medical record says. I mean, of course, I would love for it to be like completely clean and all on one page of paper, but it's really thick and there's a lot of different things on there. But I care most about how I live on a day-to-day basis. And that is what I have been able to improve through the diet and lifestyle.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point because Like doctors are there and they can be very, very helpful for certain reasons, but sometimes you have to realize that they're not going to live in your body 24/7. So they don't see the ramifications. They don't have to feel the pain or the brain fog or the exhaustion or whatever. And they know what they know. And if you are experiencing something else that is helping you, then go for it. If it's not contraindicated, right? Like where it's not going to hurt you.
Yeah. And that's such a key word. It's something that I try to educate people a lot on. It's a great question to ask. If there's a treatment or any type of modality that you want to try, but you're not certain on how it could affect you, I do think it's important, especially if you are on a medication, to ask your doctor, are there any contraindications if I use this or if I do this? I did that because I use cryotherapy. I absolutely loved cryotherapy. It was amazing. And I say was because I recently had my first daughter and I couldn't do it during pregnancy and nursing and all the different things. And I miss it terribly, but it was a game changer from a fatigue perspective, especially during the summertime. So, but with that, I called my neurologist, and thankfully there was actually a study done on cryotherapy with MS fatigue that got phenomenal results. So I had a study that I could share with him, but I called and I said, hey, I just want to make sure that there's no contraindications to me doing this. And then that was a very, very different question versus saying, hey, I want to get in this tank that goes like below zero for 3 minutes. What do you think of that? That might have gotten complete silence and he might have hung up on me, but saying, hey, here's a study, or even if I didn't have a study, hey, here's something that I'm interested in trying because I'm hearing a lot of benefits from an MS fatigue perspective. Are there any contraindications? It's a great, great question because that gets them off the hook of having to try to validate your belief in trying something new. They're just saying they'll most often say, you can try it. There's not going to be any harm, but I doubt it's going to give you any benefits. Okay. Thank you. Farewell.
Yeah. That's like carte blanche right there. Okay. Go ahead and do it. Right.
Got it. Yep. Let's go.
That's awesome. I hadn't heard about the cryotherapy. That's interesting. So what other lifestyle things did you try or have you tried that you feel really have helped throughout your journey?
Yeah, I'm also a big proponent of body work. So that can include massage, chiropractic work, acupuncture, cranial sacral therapy. There's so many different modalities out there. And I think it's important for us to recognize that there's not one modality, just like there's no one food that's going to work for every person. And even with me, there's certain ones that I'll try in different seasons. But the two that I am most loyal to are acupuncture. I love acupuncture. I've done it for a variety of reasons. It's helped with fatigue, digestive issues. It's certainly helped on my fertility journey, not only with getting pregnant, but having a healthy pregnancy and then avoiding a postpartum flare. I feel like it just was huge through that. And then I'm also a big proponent of cranial sacral therapy. And that's one where I hesitate to mention it because the natural next question is, oh, I haven't heard of that. Tell me about it. What is it? And I'm like, oh no. It's so hard to explain because the experience is you're laying on a massage table and there's a practitioner. In the case that for my practitioner, she's actually a DO trained in the manual manipulation, but it almost feels like it's Reiki in the sense that it's such a gentle touch, but I don't think with Reiki, you actually put your hands on the body. With this one, it's like there's the touch of her hand on your body. And it's typically somewhere around the spine because cranial, your head, sacral, like the sacrum. So she'll kind of go up and down the spine, but she will do things on other areas of the body. Like if I have leg pain or head pain or arm pain, whatever it may be, I don't know what's happening inside the body when she does it. And it's not the cheapest thing. So initially you're laying on the table and you're like, what's happening? Because it feels like she's just sitting there with her hands on me and I'm paying a lot of money for this. What is happening? And then you go about the rest of your day and you're like, I cannot explain it, but there's a shift that just The migraines have been lifted, fatigue has lifted, I sleep better, digestion has improved. And one of the things that I think is so, so valuable is there were a couple times where I had symptoms come up that very easily could have been related to MS. And I went to her first. It was not a major flare. It was like a symptom that was starting to creep up. So I would go for a treatment first and I would get relief from the symptom. And I'm like, this is so helpful to have these tools so that I don't feel like anytime something goes wrong or like shifts in my body, that I have to run to the neurologist, because they're going to work with the tools that they're trained in. And they're going to say, go get an MRI. Let's look at the medications that we can give you now. And again, I am not against medicine. It is an incredible tool that has made such a difference in my life in various ways, but I don't want it to be my first and only line of defense. So when I can work with some of these body workers who can help realign the body and relieve tension or, whatever it may be, and get relief from the symptom, I'm like, okay, great. That's huge. That's something that's, again, quote unquote, within my control. So outside of diet, I'm a huge proponent of body work as well.
It's amazing you have so many different tools in your toolbox. And I feel like any of us who have had autoimmune disease for a while develop all of these tools that work for us. And it's interesting to hear too, because like what works for one person doesn't work for another and vice versa and all that. But I love hearing about alternative therapies that I've never experienced, but I hear of so many people with Reiki, for example, like saying it's an amazing experience and they feel so much, yet like to a scientific, very practical mind would be like, what? I don't even understand how that would work. So yeah, I love hearing these kind of things.
Yeah. And the two that I happen to share are ones that, in all fairness, they are a little bit more expensive. The acupuncture, you can get community acupuncture. That's one of the ways that I was able to help bring down the cost of that, because things can start to add up. But there's also a lot of things that you can do, and I do in the home, like even just having a foam roller that is super inexpensive. You can get on Amazon, or I think they even have them at like Five Below, and just laying on the ground and going up and down your spine with that, or any areas of tension. I use essential oils a lot. So like there are tools. It's not just about a dependency on a provider. I think that they're helpful to have, and they have been a game changer for me. But I also want to acknowledge that I know people are on, limited budgets, and we've been on many limited budgets throughout different seasons. And with that, I never feel like my health is compromised. I just look for different tools during that time. Okay, what's in my control? I can use a tennis ball to help release this tension in my neck. Would I love a massage right now? Yeah, but this tennis ball is here and it's free.
I think also once you've learned that something other than what your neurologist or your doctor tells you will work can work, it's really interesting and fun to find out all the different things that do work as well.
Yeah.
It's just, there's a whole entire world and probably a lot of things that people haven't tried. So
it's interesting when you talk with somebody kind of like after they're over the hump of their diagnosis, and they look back and they're like, I can't believe how much I learned about
Do you have any advice for anyone that maybe just got diagnosed?
Yeah, I would say my number one thing, have compassion for yourself. You're going through something that is really significant right now. Like there's a lot of processing that happens when you're newly diagnosed. So it can be easy to jump online and look up all the different things and feel like you have to get the quote unquote right plan figured out before you get started. And if there's anything that I would wish for you, it's that you have compassion for yourself, to allow yourself the time and space to process everything, whatever that looks like for you. For some people, that can mean journaling. For other people, that means going for walks, or talking it out with their friend, or not telling anybody. It's different for each person, but allow yourself the time and space to figure out how you need to process it. But then also, not to put the pressure on yourself that you have to have the perfect plan figured out before you get started. I hear so many people say, well, I haven't started yet because I hear this diet exists and then that diet exists, and I don't know which one I should do. And I want to make sure that I do the right one. I don't want to do the wrong one. How can you make just a small step today that will improve the foods that you're putting on your plate? So maybe you decide to have like a glass of water instead of the iced tea or the soda that you had before. Or maybe you never put a vegetable on your plate and you decide to put the vegetable that you hate the least on your plate. Like, you don't have to love your veggies yet, but which one do you hate the least? Start and add that in. So just basically start with some incremental changes and then build from there. Because when you start to make small changes, you do start to feel better. And then that will help you make the next step. You know, sometimes we can wait for the motivation to do it. And I was told very early on, and it actually wasn't even in the context of health, but it's a line that has stuck with me. Action precedes motivation. So oftentimes we'll wait for that motivation, but like just start taking some action, start taking some small steps. Don't wait for the perfect plan. Don't wait for this like massive amount of momentum to come or motivation to come. Just start taking some small steps and you will grow from there. You will grow from there.
I love that. Love that so much. It's great advice. So where can we find you if we want to know more?
Yeah, so I am at Less Pharm. That's Pharm with a PH. Less Pharm, More Table. That's my website and my Instagram handle. And then I am Alene Brennan on YouTube.
Great. Well, it's so great to have you. I love this conversation. I think it's very valuable and something that everyone should listen to. So thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure. And it was a lot of fun today.